Then we'll ask you questions.
Okay.
Probably me. Alright. Hey guys, welcome back to the Tuning into Tomkins Orchestra's podcast, where today we are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Jake Jiang.
Hey, hello. Hi, guys.
Jake is a 4-time region orchestra qualifier and a 3-time All-State qualifier. This past season, he was 16th in the All-State audition round. And today, as always, I'm Rithik, and I'm joined by my co-host, Vicki. And Jake, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me on. It's a real privilege. I never really get to speak like this before. Yeah. I'm a little nervous.
Don't be nervous.
Have some mercy on me, guys.
But on the topic of nervousness, performance and auditions are typically something that makes a lot of people nervous, and a lot of people seem to have choking moments. And as someone who has seen a lot of success, how do you feel before auditions and during auditions? What is it like for you?
It's a good question. I think most of the time on the day of the audition, I'm quite nervous. I think that's natural. A lot of people are nervous, right? Because if you care about something, you're going to be nervous if you have to do it well. And so, yeah, usually before the audition, quite nervous. But when you're in the room with everyone else, I think there's this shared feeling of nervousness. And I think that's something you can kind of, I guess, connect with, and through that kind of get over your nervousness in a way. It's like y'all are all in this together rather than seeing everyone as competition. Sometimes I just try to make friends with those around me. And I think that kind of alleviates some of the stress. And I think it's usually for me, I'm the most nervous when I'm the next person to go. Like when you're sitting in the hot seat, right? And during then, I think it's just best to kind of think about what you want to do musically rather than all your shifting in your technique. You want to focus on your tone, I would say, the sound quality that you make. And I think the point, what people forget a lot about auditions is that in the end, like, you're making music, right? You want the judges to enjoy what you're playing. So if you don't enjoy what you're playing and you're really nervous, you're shaking your bow everywhere, the judges are also going to feel nervous. They're not going to be able to enjoy that music with you. But I think if you're able to really put yourself in there, put the feeling, the emotion, the expression into your playing, using that nervous energy into something that's excellent, right? Making music, and I think that's what it's all about. If you focus more on that, I think you can also take your nervousness off of, how well I'm going to do, right? And make it more about yourself and sharing the joy of music.
So would you say that the things you think about during the audition are more general, or would you say that they're specific to the piece that you're playing?
I would say at times you do need to think about the specific things that you are playing in a piece, right? If there is some sort of, I guess, like phrasing you want to do or something that's like unique to this piece, right? You want to think about that. But you also want to think about the overarching kind of message that the piece is trying to convey. You want to think about that as well. So when I'm playing, I usually don't really think about anything. I just think about, trying to express what I want to express with the music, right? With the tools that I'm given, right? Through all this practice that, you've prepared months prior. It's for this moment, right? To make something extraordinary, something that's will last a lifetime, right? This memory of such great music with great people around you, right? And these judges too being able to enjoy that. So yeah, I think you need to think about specific things, but also kind of take it back into perspective, look at the big picture, right?
How long is it taking you to develop this mindset? Is it something that comes naturally to you, or did it take some trial and error?
I think it definitely takes trial and error, right? You can't really develop anything naturally without practicing it, without doing it over and over. But I do think, for me personally, I've always wanted to share music with other people. I think initially it wasn't in the best way because I'd always be playing like, oh, look at me, I'm this good or whatever. I think that's kind of bad, but it helped me to be a little more open to playing for other people, able to kind of not be as nervous. So I think during the audition, I'm really just thinking about getting that juicy vibrato, that type of thing. Don't be focused on what other people think about me. But yeah, it definitely is something that you need to take time and put effort into. It's not something that comes naturally, right? I mean, all the really good soloists and you know, it looks like they're perfectly calm and composed on the stage, but they just have so many years of experience that they know how to handle those nerves. And I would say people handle it differently, and so you need to kind of figure out and explore what works best for you, because what works for someone else, like eating a banana, might not work for you. Like, what if you hate bananas, right? And so definitely, and I think this like goes beyond just auditioning. Being nervous, we're gonna be nervous for a lot of things, right? Job interviews. I guess like if you're, whenever you're called for an occasion to speak for someone or something like that happens, right? You're gonna be nervous, and I think having this experience in high school, I think it will help me in all other aspects of my life as I grow older, because it's not just auditions that make you really scared. Yeah, it's these other things as well. So definitely a lot of trial and error, and yeah, try to figure out what works for you.
So, given that it's trial and error, do you remember your very first region orchestra experience? What was that like for you, and how did you feel during that one, as opposed to the region audition that just passed?
Mm. I would say I was much more nervous and thinking about you know every little aspect of my playing, like shifting and all that during my playing when I was doing my ninth grade region. And thinking about the little things actually causes you to mess up a lot more. But over time, I would say I've gotten a little more used to knowing how I feel when I'm nervous. So instead of thinking about the little, like nitty gritty things, thinking about the big picture. And I think I kind of reached the pinnacle of that when I was recording, because I kind of just like didn't care. Not that I didn't care, but it's more of you kind of relax and you're like, you know what? I'll play my best. I'll try my best. And what happens is what happens, right? Because I know that I tried my best. I know I did everything that I can. And so there's nothing else I can do anymore. There's no point in being nervous because I prepared so much up until this point. And so I was very relaxed in that moment. I wasn't really thinking about, technique too much. It's more of making music, especially for the room monitor. I wanted the people in there also to kind of enjoy what I was doing. And so during the warm up time, the 30-second warm up time, I actually played some Mendelssohn rather than the excerpt, because just have some fun and nothing like. I think yes, you need to take things seriously, right? But you also need to kind of enjoy yourself a little bit. I think that's just what making music's all about.
Is this a philosophy that you use when you practice as well, like just in general for orchestra? Or is this only something that you apply while performing?
I would add a third option to what you're saying. I would say this is something that I apply in all aspects of my life. It's not necessarily just orchestra or auditions. It's more of if you have something like important, something big, right? You spend a lot of time preparing for it. I think there's no regret if you know that you did everything you could in your ability, right? You were responsible with your time. You did what you needed to do, right? You did all these things that what you could do, you've done basically, right? And there's no point in, obviously it's a different story if you know that you could have done more, but you didn't because, you procrastinated or didn't manage your time well. But I think there's a comfort knowing that if you've done everything you can, right, and there's really nothing else you can do, right? The result is something that you can't control, but you can't control what you've done leading up to that result. And I think for me that gives me a lot of comfort knowing that even if I do bad, I tried my best. I've put in what I could have done, and I have no regrets.
So, when you're talking about doing everything that you can in the practice room, does that mean, like, what does that mean for you? Does that mean like practicing the same passage over and over again, or is it more of like playing through it, getting the reps in?
I would say it's definitely a combination of both. Doing everything you can, I think, is something that you have to decide for yourself. I think a lot of times you have to be honest with yourself. You have to ask when you're practicing, is this effective? Like, is what I'm doing, is it going to help me, or am I just kind of blanking out and practicing mindlessly? There's definitely a lot of responsibility and a lot of discipline that you need to put in when you're practicing, right? And I've been subject to this myself as well. When you practice, but you're thinking about other things, or you're not kind of like completely focused in on what you're doing. Like, let's say you're doing scales, and sometimes like you're just focused on getting through the scale, or whatever. But a lot of times you need to focus on each like individual shift. Sometimes doing it very slowly to build that repetition, that muscle memory. It's the same thing like if you're practicing a fast passage or whatever. You're doing rhythms. You're doing like all sorts of things to make it better. You have to think about what will be most effective. You have to kind of use your mind a lot when you're practicing. And I think that is what holds a lot of people back from improving a lot, is that they practice a lot. You can practice a lot, 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. You can do all that. But if you're not focused when you practice, the results will be very poor. So it's definitely, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to ask, am I practicing to the best of my ability? Am I putting everything I can, right, into each practice session? And I think after you practice, every time you should be tired. And I would say if you're practicing with like very intensely, I think the maximum you can do is maybe 1 hour, and you have to take some sort of break, kind of take your mind off and kind of relax for a bit and get back to it. But your question, yeah, I think you have to be honest with yourself, right? You can't be lying and saying, oh yeah, I'm doing effective, I'm doing the most that I can do. But I think deep down everyone knows if they're lying to themselves or not.
And for both practicing and for performances, do you focus more on listening, or do you focus more on the feeling in your fingers and exactly where things are supposed to be?
I would say you should have built in the latter by now, all the technique, all that type of thing. And when you're performing, when you're auditioning, you should just be really listening. But don't listen too hard, because then if you like hear like a note out of tune or whatever, you're like, oh, you get really scared. I haven't experienced this myself, but like let's say you're playing with orchestra, like a concerto. It's really hard. I mean, you're playing with 120 players, and you're trying to get your part to match and line up with them. There's going to be a lot more listening, and it'd be kind of embarrassing if you didn't have your technique part down, right? You're fumbling all over the place. So yeah, I would say performing a lot of the time is more about listening and adjusting to kind of what's happening around you.
How do you adjust once you do make the mistake? How do you move past that without it ruining the way you're playing constantly? Because whenever I perform and I do a playing test, doesn't even matter if I'm just in class, and I make a mistake, it's all I can focus on.
Yeah, that's tough. I think that's something also that you'll have to learn like over time, right? Especially, under pressure, you mess up. We're definitely gonna mess up more than we would, in the practice room or when we're not as pressured. But when you do mess up, I think, like the 5 stages of grief. I think you go through that like in like a second, like basically. But some people like they maybe go through it for 5 seconds, and that kind of ruins the playing that happens after. So you have to accept what just happened, like in an instant, right? You have to be like, okay, I messed up. So what? Am I gonna die? No, I'm not gonna die. It's fine. I mess up, and then just keep going, right? You still want to focus on the overall idea of the music. You don't want to get caught up on. But I mean, it's definitely way easier said than done, right? It's like if you miss a big shift, it probably might sound pretty bad, or but you just have to move on, right? Don't look back. And I think I don't want to be like poetic or whatever, but that's like a lot of life, right? When something happens, it's easy to look back and say, I messed up, or like, look, I could have done something differently that wouldn't have caused this outcome. Sometimes you just have to move on. That's just the fleeting nature of life.
Yeah, so especially when it comes to like big technical passages, you talked a lot about musical passages where you're trying to get the message out. But for technical passages where like it's a concerto and you're playing accompaniment for the orchestral melody, how do you practice those parts, and how do you make sure that everything is perfectly in line?
That's tricky. When you said that, like a bunch of passages came up to mind. Like when you're just doing a bunch of sixteenths or a bunch of weird rhythms, and you still got the orchestra playing in the background. And I don't know. I haven't. I don't think I can. I'm like qualified to talk about this, but I think a lot of it is obviously you have to know your part. I mean, you have to like be able to play that in your sleep, like Tchaikovsky or not condense it, but like the ending to the first movement. It's pretty fast, pretty hard. First you have to have that down, and I think after that it's kind of like I guess you just practice more with your accompanist, or I guess your orchestra that you're playing with. And I think to be efficient, going back to like listening, right? You want to listen and see how your part fits in, like that really technically difficult part. You want to see how that fits into the rest of the orchestra. Because sometimes you're playing something that's really technically difficult, but it's super irrelevant. It's like some oboe in like the orchestra has the melody, while you're like just, shredding out these 16th note runs or whatever. And so definitely think about, the context of the orchestra, like what your part is. You have to know the part and play accordingly to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And how would you talked a lot about getting it down so that you can listen. How would you get it down to the point where you can play it in your sleep?
Okay. I would say, practice makes perfect. Just kidding. It doesn't make perfect, but I mean, there's no free lunch, right? You gotta put in that work. You have to practice. If you want to get good at something, if you want something, you have to work for it. Sometimes that's not always the case. You can work for something, you might not get it, but that's a different story. Most of the time, right? If you want to nail a passage every single time, well, not every single time, but most of the time, 99 times out of 100, you want to nail a passage, you have to practice. And it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. I think for me, a lot of it is just repetition. Just playing it over and over again. But not lazy repetition when you're playing and, not thinking about anything. You want to think through every single repetition, every single little detail, so that when you're on stage, when you're performing, you don't have to think about it. And everything comes naturally. But that requires a lot of work, behind the stage.
You mentioned that you don't think there's any such thing as perfect, but do you think you've ever actually had a perfect performance? What's the closest you've gotten to a perfect performance?
No, I don't think anyone has ever had a perfect performance. And, even the greats, like Heifetz or Halleck, right? They definitely mess up, but it's so subtle that no one can tell but themselves. And so for me, I think the closest that I've had to a perfect performance, I think, was actually this year when I was recording for Allstate, because I don't know, I felt pretty good about it and didn't really worry too much about it. But yeah, it's impossible to get. I mean, I think that's a given, right? No one can be perfect. We all fall short to some sort of standard.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things I remember most clearly about my All-State experience. And that was sitting in the warm room watching you come in. You played Tchaikovsky Meditation, Paganini, like every single concerto and thing in your orchestra, and you never, like in your repertoire, and never once touched the orchestral excerpts or the etude things. And that was like, for me, a defining feature. It was like, this man understands. He's ready for this, right? And so, how do you think that experience of like not practicing any of it right before you went in actually affected the way you play?
I think for sure it definitely does. If you take your mind off of something, I mean, obviously you'll think about it less. And so how do you think about it less? You do something else. So that's why I was just kind of playing random concertos, random pieces from whatever, right? Because I was nervous, it is some high stakes situation. You get one chance to record. But right, going back to the thing where it's like you have to find what helps you be less nervous, and you have to learn that over time. And I think for me, it's taking my mind off of current situation. That sounds kind of bad. It's like I'm escaping reality. I guess in a way you kind of are, but yeah, it just kind of works for me. I don't know what else to say. Yeah.
When you're in these auditions, like especially right before like a big passage or like something that you know is really important that they're watching out for, do you focus on all the things that you did in your practice, or do you kind of just like zone it out and just think like, all right, whatever, here goes nothing?
Yeah, well, you kind of have to be confident in what you're going to do, right? I think a lot of times when I remember this year they had in the road, there's a shift, pretty big shift from a D to an F. I'd messed it up, but I remember in the moment I was thinking, I don't even think I was thinking anything. I just kind of shifted, and I think that's what you're supposed to do. You don't want to think about every little technical thing because then our region clinician, he was kind of talking about it. The more you think about your technique, the more you think about like what you're doing with like your mechanical movements, right? The more likely you are to mess up. So again, I know I'm like saying this a lot. You're trying to make music. So if you think about the musical aspect of what you're doing, you're likely to not only get the technical part correct, which you should have spent in the practice room making good. You'll get that correct, and you'll be able to express more musicality through what you're doing. So, yeah, before it's definitely difficult though when you're right before it and it's a big shift, right? It's a big octave jump or something like that. Again, it takes time. You have to put in the work. You have to practice.
How much do you practice to feel this confident and like to know that you've practiced and you've done everything you can?
I think this just depends on the person's own conscience. I guess some people, they don't feel comfortable only practicing, like 3 hours. So they have to practice 5, and then they'll feel like, they've done enough. Other people, they're satisfied with 2 hours of focused practice, right? For me, also, I feel like practice is I feel like it's kind of like running, running, it's a kind of mental battle you have to fight every day, especially if you're doing such high intensity every day, like, marathon runners, or it's not necessarily just physically getting up. It's a lot of discipline you need to have. And so, yeah, sometimes I'm not that disciplined, and then I end up not practicing, or practicing for like way less than what I usually would, or just practicing inefficiently. I think that happens a lot. But over time, I'd say the more you practice and the more you kind of think through your practice, you'll get better at using your time well, doing helpful practice, right? Focused practice. And so, going back to the question, I'd say now I'm not practicing as much. I'm hoping to focus on kind of the chamber music that we're doing. I think that's really fun. Playing with other people. Oh, chamber music is so hard. You're playing with 4 other people. Everything has to be perfect, really. I mean, if one person's out of tune, you're just dragging the whole quartet down, or quintet, the whole ensemble. And so, if you want a number, I'd say like at least 1 hour. Sometimes I think 2 days ago I didn't practice, but I would definitely encourage, if anyone's listening, yes, do practice, right? It's just, but I mean, if you have priorities, if you care about something else that's on your mind, right, more than orchestra, I'd say put more time into that then. But definitely don't be lazy with whatever you do. Find something that suits you. Find something that you're interested in. Find something you enjoy, and invest time into that, right? Don't just go home and doom scroll for like 6 hours and then, you just wasted your whole day away. No, do find something that's fulfilling. But at the same time, don't get too caught up in doing this where it kind of takes over your mind and that's all you can think about. You're obsessed with it all day. So there's this fine balance, right? You don't want to be too lazy, but you don't want to be too obsessed. And you have to find, where you lie in there and how you can adjust.
Is there a particular practice session that really sticks out to you as, like, in your memory, that was really good and that's what my practice session should be like?
I think I might have had a few, but that's also something I've always been wondering. Like, what does it mean to practice well, practice effectively? Because I've like definitely struggled. I'm like, what is it? I'm always like, sometimes I'm watching videos on, like tips and tricks, how to play violin. I mean, the stuff you can find on YouTube is crazy these days. It's really good. But it's definitely difficult to know if you are efficiently practicing. Or actually, no, I wouldn't say it's difficult, but a lot of the times you're not satisfied with what you've practiced. And so I would say that's kind of normal, but also being forgiving to yourself, right? If you mess up or if you like realize that the past 30 minutes you've just been blanking out, playing like the first 16th notes of, Tchaikovsky over and over again, right? You have to be like, oh, hey, look, I messed up, but now that I know I messed up, I can make it right. I can use my time well. And so I think you have to know, like when you're analyzing a passage, you have to figure out what's tricky for you and kind of break it down. You have to use your brain a lot when you're practicing. It's actually very difficult. It's not just, oh, look, this part's hard. Let me play it over and over again. There's rhythms. There's certain patterns you can do in your playing. I think there's even things you can do that aren't related to like the technical aspect of it. You can do a lot of things, and I think what works for one person might not work for another. So that's why you have to make your own method of practice, if that makes sense. Like if there's this certain passage in I guess like I don't know, like Sibelius third movement, the opening. If that bowing is tricky, you could slow it down, right? Or you could do. You just have to make something that works for you, something that targets your weakness, right? And so, I think that's something I really struggled with. Like everyone's saying, this will work for this passage and this for another, right? But it doesn't, and I think that's something that I've slowly learned over the course of high school is that you have to practice in a way that helps you. You have to make your own kind of method to practicing. And so for me, a lot of the times I'm trying to. So I would say like one of my more successful practice sessions are when I'm able to find what's wrong and create a solution to it so that it will help me work on it rather than just, doing some repeated rhythm over and over. Obviously, that's helpful, but you also want to add variety to what you're doing.
What advice would you give other students and musicians who are maybe interested in auditioning for Allstate or auditioning for any kind of performance, but are too afraid or a little worried about putting themselves out there in that way?
Mm. I mean, that's tricky because if you, that's like you're kind of conflicted, right? You want to do something, but you are also kind of scared and worried. But I would say this might sound odd. It has nothing to do with music, but if you surround yourself with a good community, people that will keep you accountable, people that are honest with you, but not overbearingly um, blunt, right? If you find yourself surrounded by a good community, I think you'll find that encouragement to be able to put yourself out there a little more. Um, and I would say, because if you're conflicted, it's really hard to make a decision. I could say, just put yourself out there, but like, what does that mean? That I think that's kind of empty and meaningless. I would say that having a lot of people around you to help and support you, encourage you, I think that is what would give you the motivation to, pursue auditions or really anything for that matter, right? To do something that you want to do, but you're scared to do, because sometimes you need people around you to support and help you.
And finally, as we're starting to finish up here, what, like you said, that you've made All State, you've made Region. How has that affected like your next time after you have made Region next year? How has that affected your mindset during the next Region audition? Is it more pressure to make Region again because you've done it once, or is it more of that I've done it once, I can do it again?
I would say it might be a little bit of both, but I'm definitely feeling more of what you described in the former, that there's more pressure. I especially felt that for Region because in ninth grade I was like ninth or something, and then last year, 2 years ago I was fifth, and then last year I was third. And so everyone's like, oh yeah, you better get concertmaster this year. And I think it kind of got to my head, or a lot of pressure, right, on continually doing better and improving. And this year I got 10th, so I was I was a a little bummed out, but it's kind of ridiculous, right? I have to put it in perspective again, right? I'm complaining about 10th. Isn't that crazy? It's like that. No, that's not fair. You can't complain about 10th, right? There's, was it 270 people that audition, and like half of them didn't make it, and you had this opportunity to play in symphony, in first violin. Like, how grateful, how thankful should I be? And I think that's something I was blinded in that moment by my pride, right? The past years I've done so well, and all of a sudden, this year, I quote unquote did so bad, right? And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he also expressed the same thing. Last year he did really well. This year he still did well, but not as well as last year, and he was complaining. And so, kind of through that, I was like this is me right now. I'm complaining about, like the most trivial things ever. And so, I think this could be applied to everything that we do, right? You got those really smart kids in physics and, sorry, physics, random class, but it's like, oh man, I only got a 90 on my test, or like I only got an 85. Dude, like that's awesome. Like that's a really good grade, and you should be happy with that. And I think a lot of times we're so privileged that we forget how lucky we really are and how fortunate we are to be in these positions where we can receive all these benefits, right?
Thank you so much for joining us, and for
No problem.
like, you're so philosophical. The answers were so complex. Like, genuinely, I feel like I improved my playing just by listening to you speak.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. It's really a pleasure doing this with you. It's my first time, and I really liked it. Oh, it's fun. It's just like having a conversation with like a couple friends, except you're being recorded, and there's a lot of pressure because people are watching.
Performance pressure.
Yep. All right.
Yeah,
Thanks
this
for
has
having
been
me on,
great.
guys.
It's been fun. The endings are always hard.
Yeah.